Welcome to the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast, your trusted source for simple strategies to improve your mental and physical fitness. Throughout this podcast, we will discuss how you can manage your mental health by practicing mental fitness, building emotional resilience and curiosity to handle life's challenges. We'll also highlight the crucial link between physical fitness and your overall mental well-being. My name is DJ Ligori, and I want you to realize that you are not alone with this challenge. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and welcome to today's episode. All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. My name is DJ Ligori, and we are officially on episode number 101. And before we dive into today's podcast, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody who congratulated me on the 100th episode. Very, very appreciative and grateful for the congratulations and anybody who has been listening to the podcast. As I've mentioned before, this type of work is very important to me. It's helped me in ways that I can't even really describe, mental and physical fitness. And so I just wanted to kind of, before we dive into today's topic, just really say thank you to anybody who said, who reached out to me and said thank you. And to anybody who's really been listening to this podcast consistently over the long term. I truly, truly appreciate it. Today, what I want to talk about is regret. And a while ago, I had a buddy of mine who actually sent me a video that I'm assuming a lot of us have seen. It's this video of the size of Earth compared to the sun, and then it compares the sun to the other planets, and then it compares the other planets to the other galaxies. And basically, I think the premise of it is it just shows how small we really are. And I remember when I had initially, I think I wrote an email about this a couple months ago. My grandma actually, she responded back to the email and she said, "What if everything matters instead of nothing mattering?" So just a kind of an interesting perspective, but it made me think about regret and how we can sometimes get ourselves so intertwined and entangle our thinking up so violently, and we start to regret things in our lives. And so what I wanted to do today is I wanted to talk about the top 5 regrets of the dying. And I want to connect this to an interesting perspective of mental fitness, and I'll explain what that is. But really, I think my goal of this podcast today is to help us all get in front of these regrets, right? So then maybe when our time is up, whenever that time may be, we won't have these regrets, right? So we will have lived a life that was more fulfilling, was more rewarding, simply because we decided to change our perspective, right? And so in mental fitness, there is a concept called the SAGE perspective. And the SAGE perspective is basically the area of our brain that is associated with all positive emotion. All right, so it's associated with love, with happiness, feeling powerful, feeling trusting, being optimistic, joyful, curiosity. It's all of the positive feelings that can flood our body. And so they call this the SAGE perspective. And within that SAGE perspective, there are 5 powers of this type of thinking. And one of those powers is called the Navigate power. And the simplest way to explain the Navigate power is actually a quote by Steve Jobs. And he talks about how we can't connect the dots going forward, meaning I don't know exactly what tomorrow is going to bring. I don't know exactly what 7 days from now, 30 days from now, a year from now, none of that, right? All I can really do is plan and execute those plans to the best of my ability. Now, looking backwards, I can remember what yesterday was like, or what 7 days ago was like, or what 30 days, a year ago was like, right? So looking backwards, I can see the connections. I can see why certain things happened. And that then led me to this very point of my life. And it makes sense at that point, right? Our futures might not necessarily make sense, but our past will make sense based upon simply what happened and what led us up to this point. So this power of the SAGE perspective is called the Navigate power. And basically, it's this idea that when we're old and we're in our, hopefully we make it to our 90s, maybe we even hit 100, right? However old we want to be, looking back on our lives, the things that caused us stress, the things that caused us anxiety, were they really worth it? Did we really need to get ourselves into those states of negative emotion that ended up being fine. Maybe it wasn't always fine, but maybe the majority of the time it ended up actually turning out okay, maybe even in our favor. And so today what I want to do is I'm going to go through these 5 regrets, and I want to frame these up in a way where when we are on our deathbed or as we are continuing to live our lives, we keep these in mind, because this navigate power is so powerful, because it allows us to really, I think, deconstruct or take the power away from a lot of the negative emotion that we may feel, because we can ask ourselves, is this really worth it? Is this really worth feeling this wave of negative emotion, right? What's the worst thing that could really happen here? What's the best thing that could really happen here, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to go through these 5 regrets, and then I want to add in just kind of like a little additional side note to each one. Kind of when I read through them, what were some of the first thoughts that had come into my head? So the first regret of people who are on their deathbed is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not to the life others expected of me. And the first thing that really popped into my head was this idea around internal versus external validation. Internal validation is this belief that I am enough. I am enough in this very moment, and I don't necessarily need others to tell me I am smart enough, I am strong enough, I am pretty enough. I don't need others' validation to feel the way that I feel about myself. That is really internal validation. And to that regret, if we had the courage to live a life true to our own values, true to our own self, then we would live a life true to our own values and true to our own self. But the problem is, a lot of the times we have external validation, and we have external factors that end up changing our course of direction. And we want to please our parents, or we want to please our coaches, or we want to get certain likes, comments, reposts, and shares on all of our social media platforms. So then we believe that we are good enough based upon others' expectations of us. And so that first regret is a really powerful one, because it really turns that light in and says, am I enough right now? Right? Do I need others to tell me I am enough? Or can I just live a life that is kind of true to myself and true to what I believe in? So regret number 1, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not to the life others expected of me. Number 2, I wish I didn't work so hard. And this one was interesting, because I think the majority of us have been raised on this belief that we must work hard in order to be successful. And I think especially today, we have all seen this new idea of like the grind culture, right? Like I have to grind, I have to work my ass off, right? This is just part of being successful today. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with the word grind. I'm certainly agree with working hard, but I really agree with the idea of working smart, right? What's the most efficient way I can help myself get from point A to point B? And maybe it's not grinding and doing things over and over again and getting barely the results that I wanted. Maybe there's some value in actually slowing down to go faster. That's one of the things that we actually coach people through, is this idea of we move so fast through our lives, we grind through so many things, we work so hard for so many different areas, when really if we actually slowed down, we actually would have went farther, right? Because we would have preserved maybe a little bit more of our intellectual capability, maybe a little bit more of our emotional stamina, maybe a little bit more of our physical strength, right? And it actually would have allowed us to go farther, right? And I think too, it's important to also consider moderation. Everything is good with moderation. Anything of excess typically ends up being detrimental to some aspect of our life. So if we work so hard, if we grind so hard all the time, is that being moderate? Is that moderating certain areas of our life, especially our work ethic? So number 2, I wish I didn't work so hard. Number 3, regret. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. And I think if you're a guy, definitely listen up here, because guys, women like guys who can express their feelings. Women like guys who are emotionally available. That is one of the things that we have heard in a lot of our Acres of Diamonds sessions when we talk to women and we say, is this an attractive aspect of men? And they say, yes, men who can actually express their feelings and actually talk about them and aren't afraid to talk about them, that's attractive, right? And that's needed within a relationship. So I think we've been raised, and I don't know if this is necessarily a male thing or a female thing. I'm coming at it just from a male perspective, that if we do express our feelings, that can be shown as a weakness, right? Because we're being vulnerable. Yet, if we express our feelings, aren't we necessarily being authentic and actually being honest with ourselves, and then expressing a representation of authenticity, which then is probably going to be perceived as strong? One of the things we say all the time is vulnerability is strength, right? Leaders of today who are vulnerable show others that they do not have all the answers, right? They show others that they are not perfect. And when you then have a team who says, wow, my leader isn't perfect. All right, so that means that I won't necessarily be perfect. I'm okay with making a mistake here, but yet finding a way to correct it, learning from it, and moving forward. That's how modern leadership, that's the direction that we're trying to take modern leadership, right? Leading with your heart, not necessarily your mind, right? So I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. This is the idea of how vulnerability is strength. And this also connects back to the internal versus external validation, because internally, if we have the strength to express our feelings, we are going to feel strong, right? We're not going to be holding back any certain emotion. We're not going to necessarily have any emotion controlling us in a way that we are not really conscious of. External validation means that we aren't going to share our feelings and express them because we are afraid of what other people might think of us. So we're going to hold those back, right? When really, just like that leadership example, when we have the courage to actually express those feelings, be honest with ourselves, and show others it's okay, you're only going to help those other people, right? You're going to show them that you don't have all the answers, and that the vulnerability that you're showing is actually a bridge to connect with them, right? It's that opportunity to connect with them. So number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Number 4, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. And this was something that I remember one of the first things my father taught me when we were working in real estate was, he said it was all about relationships. And I think even coming from a larger macro perspective, I think life in general is really about relationships, right? You're the average of the 5 people you hang out the most with. You rise or fall to the level of your associations. The people around you are going to have a big effect on who you ultimately become, right? The way that you act, your characteristics, certain behaviors. And I remember John Gotti once said, he said, in the end, all we have is memories. And I've seen the quote, die with memories, not dreams, right? And when I think of the idea of memories, all of my memories involved other people. Like the greatest memories of my life, and even the toughest memories of my life, they all involved other people in some way. So I think this is super important to have 2 to 5 friends that you can go a mile deep with and an inch wide, instead of 50 friends that you go a mile wide with and an inch deep, right? Have those people in your life who are in the front row of your life, and make that front row very selective, right? This does not have to be 20 plus people. This can be a very small amount of people, yet they're very important to you. And these are the friends that you can be vulnerable to, right? That you can express your feelings to, and you're not going to be judged by them, right? Those are those people who are in that front row, and those are the people that you stay in touch with throughout your whole life. So number 4, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. And number 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. This is something that I have seen consistently within a lot of our Acres of Diamonds mental fitness groups, is this belief that when we take time for ourselves, we almost have a feeling of guilt. And I made a TikTok and a YouTube, I made a social media video about this, and I put it out over all of our channels. If you want to take a look at it, _Acres of Diamonds is all of our social media handles. And I basically said, why do we feel guilty when we take time for ourselves? And I had some great comments and great engagement on this video. And one of the comments talked about how when we take time for ourselves, we may perceive our value to go down. And For example, if you work at a job and you take a week off to go on a vacation to get some relaxation, to kind of unwind a little bit, slow down a little bit, to go faster, kind of what we talked about earlier, to that company, technically, logically speaking, that week that you are not there, you are not of value to them, right? You're not working for that company. So you may perceive the time that you're taking for yourself as losing value somewhere else. And that's where that guilt may start to come into play. I think another area of why we may avoid letting ourselves be so happy is this ability to trust ourselves. And I don't even know why this kind of came into my consciousness when I was planning for this episode, but if we have the ability to trust ourselves, then we may take that next step to actually taking time for ourselves. I think there's some level of trust that we must believe in from an internal standpoint in order to be okay with actually taking that time for ourselves. All right. So that's, I think, that's a deeper dive into that regret. But real quick, let me rip through these. Number one, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not to the life of others expected of me. And always remember the internal versus the external validation. Number two, I wish I didn't work so hard. Kind of redefining grind culture, right? Let's work smarter. Let's work in moderation, right? We can't fill up others' buckets if we don't have anything to give them. Number three, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Expressing feelings we've been raised is shown as a weakness, yet we are now realizing it's actually showing authenticity and vulnerability is strength. Number four, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Remember our memories, right? How many of your memories involved other people? Think of those 3 to 5 people in your life that are your true friends, that are in the front row of your life. And number 5, I wish I'd let myself be happier. How much do we trust ourselves? Do we feel guilty taking time for ourselves? And are we still of value, even if we aren't necessarily completing our job or doing our daily tasks, right? When sometimes we just need a little bit of time for ourselves to make ourselves, or to allow ourselves to be happier in whatever shape and form that is. So let's do our best to get in front of these regrets. Let's use that sage power of the navigate, right? To look back on our life and say, in those moments when I had the ability to take some time for myself, when I had the ability to maybe moderate my work schedule, when I had the ability to express my feelings or really build a deep connection with somebody, I decided to do it. So then I wasn't going to regret it when the end of my life was upon me. So thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode, number 101 of the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. Hope you guys got some value out of today's lesson. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. If you received something interesting from today's episode, we would kindly appreciate if you could leave us a rating or a review, or even share this podcast with someone you believe needs to hear its message. The Libraries and Weight Rooms brand is a division of our parent company, Acres of Diamonds, where we are on a mission to end mental suffering through mental fitness. If you would like to learn more about our mission and support this cause, please visit our website at www.youracresofdiamonds.com. And remember, humans were designed to be incredible. Every human has greatness within, and you are the answer to rediscovering that greatness. Take care, keep leading, and we will talk to you soon.